Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. I know it's almost lunchtime, so we will not keep you too far away from your food. But everyone with me, I have Bo Hines. Bo is the Executive Director of the President's Working Group on Digital Asset Markets within the White House. Within his capacity, he works with David Sachs, who is the White House crypto and AI czar, to coordinate the White House's role of government in the whole economy and their approach to digital assets. Bo, welcome to Digital Asset Summit. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to be here with you, Kyle.
And not to be confused with the White House Digital Asset Summit that occurred 10 days ago.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, Bo, let's jump right into it. I think this is your first time at an industry conference since you started the role. So for those in the audience who may not be familiar with you, can we start with your background and just how you ended up working with the president on crypto policy?
Sure. Well, I have a very unique background as it relates to this space. I actually played football my freshman year at North Carolina State, and I ended up playing in the Bitcoin Bowl, which was in St. Petersburg. That sparked my interest in cryptocurrency. Became a pretty avid trader after that, bought my first Bitcoin shortly thereafter as well. But it's amazing to see everything that this space has gone through, really in the face of headwinds. You know, I think this is the first time that we have tailwinds at our back, and the president is extraordinarily excited to capitalize on that. I ended up going to Yale, where I finished my undergraduate degree. I ended up going to law school at Wake Forest, where I studied internet and blockchain law, which was a new and emerging field in the legal space at that time. But shortly thereafter, I ran for Congress. Ended up falling just about a point short in my congressional race, which was a swing seat in North Carolina's 13th at the time. In North Carolina, we like to draw maps for sports. So those district lines have changed quite a bit over the course of the last few years. But alongside of that, created a growth equity firm with 4 other partners. And we specialize in the data tech and marketing space, but I stayed an active participant on the retail side in terms of investing in this space. So I've seen a lot of the challenges that you guys have faced. And I have empathy to the fullest extent, just in terms of what you guys have dealt with lawfare, with unfair regulatory practices. Everything this industry has been through has been different than other industries in the United States, and that's something that we're keen on changing.
Awesome. So you've now been in this role for a little bit of time. Can you share with everyone here what exactly is your role?
Yeah, so this is a new office in the White House, and this is something that we started discussing on transition shortly after the president's victory of how are we going to address this industry? How are we really going to change the practices between interagency that have been ongoing for the last decade and a half? And we decided that it would be best to create an office in the White House that dealt directly with this space. I mean, that's how fantastic of the work that you guys have done to propel the industry forward, really over the course of the last 4 years, in the midst of a very authoritarian, unfair Biden regulatory regime as it related to digital assets. But I got together with David Sachs, our AI and crypto czar, who's just a brilliant human being. Obviously has immense experience in digital assets. He's taken it upon himself to sacrifice a lot to be in his role. So it's an extraordinary opportunity to work with him, and I know at the White House we're very fortunate to have him. The president made a fantastic decision with that. But we started kicking up exactly what this was going to look like, and I think that we determined it would be best for our office almost to act as an administrator and or Sherpa between interagency activity, industry, White House policy, and really what's happening on Capitol Hill. I think that one thing this industry lacked for quite some time was having a vessel that could ensure that everyone was singing from the same sheet of music. I mean, there are differences of opinion in every industry, but this is really a coming of age for digital assets in the crypto space, and we wanted to make sure that we were shepherding that in correctly.
We'll come back to kind of like y'all's role and how you interface with industry here in a minute. But first, I just want to touch on probably what I think is the most pressing question for entrepreneurs in the space. There are a lot of folks, still to this day who may look at very talented entrepreneurs who may look at crypto and just be a little skittish because they've just seen all the negative headlines in the last few years. And look, we still don't have legislation from Congress, although fingers crossed that's going to come soon. But in the meantime, before we get legislation, what assurances can you provide those potential entrepreneurs that the changes that are going to be implemented by the president are going to be real and sustaining and ultimately supportive of their entrepreneurial efforts?
Well, I think we've made tremendous progress over the course of the last 8 weeks to deliver on the president's promises. He's promised this is going to be the golden age for digital assets. He's promised to make the United States the crypto capital of the planet, and we fully intend on delivering on those promises. He said at the summit this past week that he's going to make sure that we end any rules and regulations that undergird Operation Choke Point 2.0. That's already in process. We've seen what the OCC did a couple of weeks ago. I'll refer back to the day 3 executive order, in which the president created the working group, which is comprised of interagency actors and other White House offices. We have these landmarks. So we're past the 30-day landmark in which interagencies were supposed to do an internal review and or audit of everything they touched relating to digital assets in terms of rulemaking, and provide us with reports of those things. We've gone through those reports, we've compiled them, and now we're approaching the 60-day landmark on March 24th, where we're going to come together and they're basically asked to produce recommendations for us. That leads us to the 120-day landmark in the EO, in which we're supposed to provide a full report of everything that interagency actors are doing and what they can do to ensure that innovation in the space is protected, and that we remove all the barriers from institutional adoption as it relates to digital assets. And I think that we're well on our way of doing that. It's just going to be a process, but one we want to move expeditiously on. I think the president's made that very clear.
Yeah, I could just say, adding just a little color to that, our expectations on November 7th when we woke up were things would get better, and the work that, Bo, you and your team have done in the last 8 weeks is wildly exceeded our expectations. So very, very excited to see the continued rate of progress.
Well, I'll just say to that, I think it's worth giving a shout out really to Hester over at the SEC and all the work that she's doing. We have Brian incoming at the CFTC, who's going to be phenomenal. Our partners over at Treasury with Secretary Bessent, they've just been phenomenal actors to work with. So I feel like we have a very unique opportunity and time to make monumental change as it relates to this space, and we need to capitalize on that. We need to make sure that the United States is the leader in terms of digital technological advancement. I think that this tremendous opportunity doesn't present itself very often with any industry. So we're excited to capitalize on that and move forward very quickly.
Awesome. Next up, what can we as an industry expect to see from Treasury, SEC, and CFTC in the coming months? I know we've seen a few things like the SEC's Crypto Task Force and Commissioner Pershing UA have done an awesome job there. But is there anything that you're really excited about from these agencies that you think the market doesn't kind of appreciate yet?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I'll pivot back to what happened in the first couple of weeks of the administration. When on Capitol Hill, the Senate and the House announced a bicameral working group as it related to digital assets. I think that the market didn't fully appreciate how impactful that really was. These were both chambers coming together saying that they were going to enact meaningful legislation as it related to this space, and they understood the importance of the United States leading the charge on digital assets. And so I'll start there. And in terms of interagency activity, I think you can fully expect each of these actors to deliver on the president's promises, which are to remove any of the barriers that undergird Operation Choke Point 2.0. I think that we'll start moving expeditiously on that after these recommendations come in at the 60-day landmark. And I think that a lot of these actors can move on these things independently. It doesn't always take an executive order. And I think in this case we have phenomenal actors at these agencies that will move quickly to remove a lot of these things. We're just excited to work with them along the way.
Awesome. So last week, the Senate Banking Committee had a markup on the Genius Bill proposed by Senator Hagerty, and the House Financial Services Committee is now working on their companion bill called the Stable Bill, put forward by Congressman French Hill. Can you give the White House's perspective on how close we are to getting stablecoin legislation on the president's desk and ultimately into law?
I think it's imminent. Obviously we saw that vote come out of the Senate Banking Committee in an extremely bipartisan fashion. I think it was 18-6, which was fantastic to see. I think our colleagues on the other side of the aisle also recognize the importance for U.S. dominance in this space, and they're willing to work with us here. And that's what's really exciting about this. There's not many issues in Washington, D.C. in which folks can come together from both sides of the aisle and really propel the United States forward in a way that's comprehensive. And this is one in which we can. And I think that that's such a unique opportunity for all of us to take advantage of, whether it's institutional players, whether it's digital asset players. We should just be very excited about what's to come. I think that stables could be on the president's desk here in the next 2 months. And I don't think that the market fully grasps yet what that could do for the U.S. economy in terms of U.S. dollar dominance, in terms of different payment rails, in terms of altering the course of financial markets for the rest of history. I mean, this is going to be a massive piece of legislation that really propels the United States forward, and that's something that we're very much looking forward to. And we're also extremely thankful for Senator Scott and his leadership at Senate Banking. We're extremely thankful for Chairman Hill with House Financial Services and many other actors as well that are propelling this forward on the Hill. And we just look forward to working alongside of them as partners and offering whatever support we can to make this process expeditious. And then it's on to market structure.
Before we get into market structure, you all hosted the White House Digital Asset Summit a week ago, 10 days ago. Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure to go. I know a lot of people have been asking what was discussed, behind closed doors. I'm really not allowed to talk about that, but perhaps you can share a little bit with everyone else here, kind of what were Bo's biggest takeaways from the summit?
Honestly, I think we just touched on it a little bit here with most of the folks from this space were saying we need these things to stick. I mean, you can do anything with the power of the pen from the Oval, but the reality is if you have an incoming administration that's not so friendly to the space, those things can be reversed rather quickly, and we don't want to see that happen. I think that under President Trump's leadership and everything that he's done to usher in positive changes as it relates to this industry, our colleagues on Capitol Hill are extremely excited to enact these meaningful pieces of legislation. As the president would say, I think that we're hoping for a big, beautiful Rose Garden ceremony for digital assets and the legislative initiatives that they're working on there. And I think that the president laid it out at the summit. He wants to see these things done before August recess, and I think we're well on our way of accomplishing that.
So the night before the summit, the White House dropped a fun EO for everyone, including the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. I'm sure everyone in this audience is a little curious. Can you just share some inside baseball on how this EO came to be?
Well, we delivered on the president's promises that he made on the campaign trail. The president was adamant about creating the SBR. We wanted to make sure that we did it right in a way that respected Bitcoin for being so unique, and also gave credence to innovation in other spaces of the digital asset world. So, for us here, we look at Bitcoin. It's not a security, it's a commodity. It has intrinsic stored value that's traditionally accepted. It has, as David likes to describe, the immaculate conception. There's no issuer. And, that's why, as you saw in the executive order, we compared this to digital gold. It's something that's imperative for the United States to have, retain, continue to build on. And I think that's worth pointing out that, the way that this is constructed, we talked about ways of acquiring more Bitcoin in budget neutral ways that won't cost the taxpayer a dime. And what I like to say about this president, I think it's high time that our president started accumulating assets for the American people, which is what President Trump is doing, rather than taking it away. And I think that's one thing that we really wanted to make clear in this executive order. And we're looking forward to working with our partners at Treasury and Secretary of Commerce in order to find those budget neutral ways in which we can acquire more. I've been asked all the time, it's like, how much do you want? And I said, well, that's like asking a country, how much gold do you want, right? I mean, as much as we can get.
All right, so moving from Bitcoin to kind of the other Digital Asset Summit, talking a lot about tokenization. Larry Fink likes to go on TV these days and talk a lot about tokenizing assets, tokenizing funds. So far, we haven't seen much of this for U.S. equities just yet. Are there any things that your team is thinking about that might be able to help accelerate this tokenization of traditional assets?
Absolutely. I mean, we want to be on the forefront of adoption within every facet of the space. And I think that's one that could really revolutionize the financial markets for the rest of history. Just in terms of what access would be allowed for retail investors, institutional players. This is something that could invite, just an enormous crowd into the space that's never really participated before. We're working on that. I think that we'll most likely be addressing tokenization probably more in market structure than we would in stables. But these are conversations that are ongoing. We'll get with the working group, continue to talk about the best way that we can usher these new technologies in, and we'll find the right solutions. We have a lot of smart people in the building. As President Trump would say, we have a lot of high IQ people working on these different technological advancements, and I'm confident that we'll deliver the right results.
Awesome. One of the things President Trump did very early on was repeal SAB 121. I think his was called SAB 122. That made it possible for banks to start, getting involved in crypto again. What exactly do you think banks are going to do? Are they going to issue stable coins? Are they going to enable deposits? Other ideas, all of the above. But how do you all see traditional banking interfacing with crypto?
I think it's really all the above. I mean, I think they also want to be on the forefront of adoption as it relates to this space. You know, I've had TradFi folks banging down our door, you know, asking us what our plans are, what the expectation is, what the timeline looks like. And it's not because they want to throw up roadblocks or hurdles. I think that they also see the writing on the wall in the way that this is moving. You know, the system, at least in my opinion, has been archaic for a while, right? And this is ushering in new and positive change that allows the United States to lead the charge globally in terms of these innovation sectors. You know, I think that there'll be tremendous participants, and I've said repeatedly, we can have these amazing pieces of legislation, but if we don't have institutional adoption, then really it's null and void, right? I mean, we need to lead the charge in terms of this institutional process, allowing these players to come in, find their roles in the space in a way that makes sense for their businesses. But I think there's a lot of creative people out there in the private sector that are going to find ways to integrate their systems into what the digital asset space is doing.
Sweet. All right, getting into some more fun questions. What do you think is the most unexpected positive development you've seen that you could not have forecasted before starting?
It's a good question. Honestly, I think it's the speed in which we're able to move in this White House. You know, this is my first position in government, but I expected this kind of slow, you know, minutia that we were going to have to battle through. And you know, under this president's leadership, he's encouraging the experts to take charge, take the reins, and plow ahead. And that's what we've been able to do over the course of the last 8 weeks. I know that David is very excited to continue that progression. The president has given us, you know, his full support for this industry, and we're just excited to continue to usher that along. So I would say that, you know, fasten your seatbelts and hold on tight, because we're not done yet. The work has just begun, and you know, we're going to make a lot more progress here in the next couple of months.
What are the next major initiatives on your plate?
Well, I think we've outlined most of them, right? I mean, if we get through the interagency rulemaking process, you know, rid the industry of anything that undergirds Operation Choke Point 2.0, allow institutional actors to start interacting with digital asset firms in ways that they haven't before. If we get stables done and market structure done, I mean, you know, David and I could work ourselves out of a job here pretty quickly as it relates to the crypto space, which is a good thing, right? I mean, look, I'm a small government guy.
Small government, yes.
But at the end of the day, we felt like this office was necessary to usher in this change, and I think that so far under David's leadership, under the president's leadership, we've been able to accomplish a lot of that. But you know, like I described, we feel as if there's this very unique window in time to make these monumental changes. I think that we've tried to frame that for folks on the Hill, folks within interagency, saying, look, when we have the wind at our back, it's time to move, and we plan on doing that.
And then last question for everyone, or for you. A lot of people in the industry following this conversation follow kind of press from the White House and such, but they don't have a way maybe to get in touch with you. So what is the best way for industry to reach out and coordinate with you and your team? Yeah, please do. I think that I've created quite the reputation over the course of the last 6 weeks for taking quite a few industry meetings. And part of this is that, you know, I really believe that the private sector knows best. This is something that you guys, you know, live, breathe, and eat. I mean, we want to hear from you, especially as the legislative process matures. Please reach out to my office. I'm happy to connect with any of you. I'm happy to provide my email information to the Blockworks folks so they can share that along. But, you know, I want to engage. I want to be able to take what you're dealing with and translate it into something that's digestible or palatable for other actors that might not understand the space as well as the folks that are in it. And I think that's one of my responsibilities. And part of that is, you know, interacting with industry as much as I possibly can. And so I will continue to do that over the course of the next few months. And we'd love to hear really any thoughts, feedback, general concerns that you might have really as the legislative process matures and we continue to move through interagency. Awesome. Well, hey, Bo, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time. Awesome work y'all are doing. Thank you for helping make crypto truly great in America for the first time. Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle. Thanks.